Hi, I'm Mitch Woods, and I'd like to welcome you to Boogie Woogie piano course right here on video in your own home studio. And it's a pleasure for me to bring you some of the techniques and tricks of the trade that I've learned over the years playing boogie woogie, blues, New Orleans R&B, stride piano, all the great piano styles that I have learned over the years playing professionally. I have my own band, Mitch Woods and his Rocket 88s. We perform all over the United States and around the world. I have 5 CDs out, which we will talk about a little bit later. And want to welcome you once again to the course. I will be teaching you some of the techniques that I have gathered over my years of playing. Would like to say right at the beginning of the video that the best way to learn is by listening and imitating some of the greats. I have spent a lot of time listening to some of the great boogie woogie piano players of the 30s and 40s, including Meadlux Lewis, Albert Ammons, Pete Johnson, Jimmy Yancey, and then of course Professor Longhair for that New Orleans style, Jay McShann for the Kansas City style. And I've always found that the best way to learn for myself was to play the records over and over again, and now you have an opportunity to play a video over and imitate some of the bass patterns and techniques that have been laid down in the course of boogie woogie over the years. So sit back, enjoy, get by your piano, and welcome to Boogie Woogie. That was the basic boogie woogie left hand pattern in the key of C, which I just played for you. And that will start you out with your basics of boogie woogie. It's most important when learning boogie woogie to learn the left hand patterns first, I believe, and get those perfected. And then you could add the right hand and syncopate. In other words, get a rhythm going between the two hands, which will create that bounce that people feel when they hear boogie woogie. So this was the probably most basic pattern of boogie woogie in the key of C, which is following the C blues progression, or C blues scale, excuse me, or the C 7th blues chord, so you can do that. Now I'll play it at a slower tempo so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to add the right hand to this basic boogie woogie pattern, just so everybody gets a good feel of, so you get a good feel of what it should feel like once you're getting the boogie woogie down. I just showed you how to do a little bit of right hand, just to give you an idea of how it should sound once you get the basic left hand pattern going, and add the right hand to give it that bounce. And what you can think about, instead of thinking in terms of improvising too much at the beginning, would be to just play the chords with your right hand, and I'll show you how to do that just now. And that will give it the bounce. And then as you develop later, you can add your riffs and ideas that come into your head as they come around. So we'll slow it down a little bit, and this will be the left hand and the right hand. This is another pattern, another boogie-woogie bass pattern. You might call it cut time, where basically what you're doing in your left hand is you are hitting the root. We're in key of C, the root C, and the 5. And good fingering for that would be your pinky and your pointer finger on the G. So you're hitting those at the same time. Switching to the sixth, which is A, with your thumb. And by switching back and forth, you will get that cut time boogie woogie, which will give you that snap. And then once again, move it up to the 4 chord, the F. To the G, 5 chord. Now I'll add a little bit of right hand so that you get some of the syncopation. Once again, just hit the chords. That's all you have to worry about at this point, and until you get more and more involved in it, and you could be as creative as you like. Now I'll speed it up a little bit so you hear it, how it sounds. Now that's another variation on the cut time boogie woogie. I would say I probably picked some of that out from Albert Ammons, A-M-M-O-N-S, definitely an essential guy to be listening to. That's a little more complicated. I'll slow it down a little bit and show everybody what I'm doing here with my left hand. Once again, we're in the key of C, and that will give you a great bounce. It's a great bouncing boogie woogie line that I really love. And once again, you see that it just follows the blues progression. If you learn the blues progression, you know, basically you've got it down. Then you just learn your bass patterns, as many as you can. There's a lot of different ones. I'm going to go over is some of the ones I know and give you a basic idea of that. Now I'll add the right hand so you can hear once again how it goes. One thing I'll interject over here right now, when you're coming down from the 5 to doing your turnaround, the 5 to the 4, you can sometimes just hang on the 5 and eliminate the 4, and I'll show you the example. So we'll go through the whole progression. Right there, you eliminated the 4 chord. It makes it a little bit easier to get going with. Maybe keep the tempo nice and bouncy that way. That's another fun thing to do. Now that's another version, another variation on that cut time boogie, and I'm going to do it slower, and then I'm going to explain a little more about it. I think everybody will really enjoy where this bass line comes from. So I'll slow it down a little bit so everybody can watch the left hand. The slowed down version. I'll add a little right hand, once again, just hitting the chords as a real basic way to do boogie woogie. Now I'll play it at a regular tempo and listen to how it sounds. Now, did anybody notice that what you heard sounded like a train? And the point here is that much of the great boogie woogie came out of a tradition of, I believe, listening to trains and the sound of trains back in the early 1900s. And a lot of the boogie woogie players came up from Texas and Louisiana, and they played a lot of work camps where they called it barrel house style piano. There was barrel house and boogie woogie, and these were sugar camps and I don't know what, turpentine camps, whatever the heck they were producing. The boogie woogie piano players would be the itinerant musician who would go from camp to camp and entertain the workers. And a lot of his travel, I'm sure, was done by train. And you can listen to the sound of a train. Now, I grew up in Brooklyn. The only train I heard was the D train in the subway going over the elevated line. So if anybody's from Chicago, they would understand that also. But I'm sure somebody has heard a train in their life. And it's got that great syncopated rhythm, and you can imitate it on a piano. And maybe a little later on, I'll get further into some of that. But that should give you a good understanding of some roots of actual boogie woogie. This is the slowed down version of what I would call a Jimmy Yancey style boogie woogie bass line. Jimmy Yancey was a great piano player back in the 1900s and up until the 40s. And he had a slower style, and it's a good style to get started on because it is slowed down even when he plays it at a regular rate. And it's a nice, easy way to cop some of the left-hand licks. I know I did it. And now it is your turn. Now I'll do it at a regular tempo, and then I'll add the right hand so you get the idea of what I'm talking about. Now with the right hand. Now that was Jimmy Yancey's style, left-hand bass, and Jimmy Yancey was more of a mournful style of playing, more bluesy, definitely more bluesy than some of the other players like Meadlux Lewis and Albert Amos, Pete Johnson. It was more of lifting the spirits through boogie woogie. But they all learned, from what I have read, they all played with Jimmy Yancey and were influenced by his style. So he's an important pianist to listen to for that style. Now, that same style bass line you can use also for a Fats Domino style and Professor Longhair style. They both incorporated those in their style of playing boogie woogie, and which eventually became rock and roll. So I'll show you what Professor Longhair might have done with that same bass line. I'll slow it down a little bit and then speed it up again. Now, Professor Longhair always threw in that 5 on the turnaround. That's one little signature that I always notice about him, especially. Now, that was Fats Domino's style of doing that bass line, and in the right hand, he was doing 16th notes on the chord. And so there you have that other variation on the theme. Now that was a little bit slowed down version of my take on that particular boogie woogie line, and it expands upon it. And if you're, that's my best recommendation to a boogie woogie piano player, is to learn as many bass lines as you can from myself and other great piano players in the boogie woogie style, and then put your own feel into it, put your own style into it, just whatever feels natural to you in your hand. I really believe very strongly that the boogie woogie players did not expect people to be reading sheet music of what they were doing. And I think there are a lot of boogie woogie players around the world who may be able to do that very well, but they're not really getting the idea of what boogie woogie is about. It's really a spontaneous, improvised style of music, and very important to remain spontaneous and improvise. It's not a classical style of music that you can read notes for. So it's most important to add your own interpretation into it. So this is my interpretation of that bass line a little bit, and I used it in my intro piece. Now I'll add some right hand to it, and we'll go further on with the theme. And now we can speed it up a little bit more, so you really start to feel some of the syncopation. And once again, if you notice in my right hand, I'm keeping it simple and just hitting the chordal patterns. Now, we'll expand upon that a little bit now, if you like. There's different riffs you can use, and a good way to pick up riffs, once again, is listening to the records of some of the old masters and seeing what they do. And you can try a few of them and keep them in your bag of tricks. And really, that's what the right hand is doing in Boogie Woogie, is doing a lot of licks that you have learned over the years, and whatever comes out spontaneously that feels good with that. So we'll do a little bit of that now. Now another one. Those are just some of the licks you can do. A good thing to remember is you can play off of the chords. So if you're in C, you have your C major. This is the right hand we're talking about now. You have C sixth. You have C seventh. And then you also can use the C octave. And you can use all those elements within the blues scale to play with. So. And that gives you some idea of some of the licks you can do with your right hand. And there's also a lot of little tricks and specialties that all the Boogie Woogie players over the years have developed to make them stand out and be special. And I've learned some of these. And though I don't want to give them away, I will show you some of them. There's a lot of nicknames for them. I've heard Professor Longhair, they call it the over and under, because in your hands you'll be, well, let me show you. Now that's one of the little tricks of the trade, and sometimes been called over and under. Somebody like Professor Longhair might do one hand over the other, and that's how he does it. I do it the way I do it, which is just the way you saw it, and I'll repeat it again just a little bit. So classical pianists would look at that and go, that's not correct. But you have to do what feels comfortable with your hands as best you can. That's one of the tricks. Another one that works very well, it's very dramatic, is you stop time. So you'll hit. Now let me lead you into it. I'll start it again. And there you have another trick. Okay, getting back to the basic boogie-woogie bass line, we're going to extrapolate upon that theme a little bit. Don't want to be scary with those words. That just means we're going to expand upon that. And back to the regular, simple boogie-woogie bass line, which was. I want to incorporate this with the right hand, so you're getting an alternating pattern going on. In your right hand, you'll be playing the C chord, like that, and alternating with the bass line. And I'll do an example of it here slowly. So you hear how it gets that nice bounce to it, and once you learn it and you pick up the tempo, you really have a nice little bounce there. This works very well in just accompanying, if you have the whole band, if you're working with a band and you want to just get that boogie-woogie rhythm, if you're not doing a solo, this is a good thing to do. Now we'll speed it up a little bit. And along the same lines, you can do on the turnaround part of it, instead of going 5-4-1, you can do the 2-5-1 turnaround in the key of C, which is D, G, C, and using the bass line, which would go like this, and then I'll incorporate it and show you the whole thing. So. I'll do the whole thing now, and you could hear it using that turnaround. So that's another variation on the turnaround you can use. And you want to use the D minor chord. The 2 minor is better sounding, I think, than a major. So. Here it is. And there you have it with the 2-5 turnaround, that same boogie-woogie progression. Another thing we can do is a walking bass line using octaves on that same progression. So instead of going using the right hand, you can do it all with the left hand using octaves. Now I don't have big fingers. A lot of people say piano players need long fingers. Well, it's not true. Don't listen to what they tell you. Dr. John does not have long fingers. As a matter of fact, he's missing one of his fingers. So anybody worries about that, just forget about that right off of the bat. But if you can stretch the octaves, which most people can, here's the key of C octave. This is all you need to do for this bass pattern. And you want to start out way at the bottom. I'd like to interject right now that it's important to have 88 keys on your piano if you're going to be playing boogie woogie. And it's also important to be using a real acoustic piano. Now, I understand there's plenty of digital keyboards out there, and I use one myself personally when I perform because it's hard to find a real piano in clubs these days. So those work perfectly fine, but I really think to get a true boogie woogie feel, you need an acoustic instrument, a real piano, even if you have to just get a big old upright for a couple $100 to practice on. You can find them, the great old American pianos. There were millions of them made at the turn of the century, and they're still out there. And you can probably get a good one for pretty inexpensive, under $500. And that might be a good thing to learn boogie woogie on. Plus, you'd be getting that real old style sound on there. So I just want to interject that there for all the players out there. So back to I should also tell you, I've come across some pianos that were not worth playing on, and I've been known to destroy a few around the world when I have come across some that were just so trashed out that they weren't even playable. So I understand the situation out there. This is the, what I'd like to do is do the octaves in the left hand, and then we're going to do a walking bass line with them as the second variation on this theme. So if we're in the key of C, this is how it would go. That's the basic pattern using your octaves. So I'd like you to practice that a little while. Get used to doing octaves in your left hand. It's a very helpful tool for playing boogie woogie bass line. Now the variation on this theme to really get a bounce going and to get that walking bass line would be like this. Now adding the right hand, once again, using the same method, just doing chords to start out with. When you get more adept at it, go ahead and improvise as much as you want in your right hand. That's the whole fun about boogie woogie that I believe is you have a repetitive bass line that is giving you a very set rhythm that you can't miss, and it's swinging, and in your right hand, you're really dancing on the keys is what you're doing. And once you develop it, you'll feel it. It's just you're keeping your right hand dancing along with your left hand. And that's why it's such fun music, and that's why it's a classic style that will never die as far as I can see. Okay, students of boogie woogie. So by now you probably heard quite a bit of the left-hand pattern, and you're absorbing some of that. You've been going out and getting those old Meadlux Lewis, Albert Ammons, Pete Johnson records and CDs, and some of the Mitch Woods CDs, and practicing along with them. And now I'm going to let you in on some more right-hand stuff, because I have been concentrating quite a bit on the left. And what makes boogie woogie players stand out from other piano players, they always say he's got a strong left hand. So it is very essential that you have that. You need to be fluent in both hands to be a strong boogie-woogie piano player. And the right hand, as I said, your left hand is creating a rhythm, a very distinct rhythm. And we showed you those patterns. The right hand will be improvising with the blues scale, along with those strong rhythms, creating boogie-woogie. So it's important that you know the blues progression. Number one, the basics, obviously, of boogie-woogie comes out of the blues progression. And in the key of C, well, in all the keys, it's 1, 4, 5 chord is the basis of it. So in the key of C, that would be the chord, C chord is the 1 chord. The 4 chord is the F, and the 5 chord is the G. And you will be using those chords, and the flatted 7th, then you have a C7th chord. The same with the F. You have the flatted 7th. You have the F7th chord. Then back to the C7th again. Then up to the G7th. Then down to the F7th. And back down to the C7th. And the turnaround would be G7th. Now, playing off those chords, you also need the knowledge of the blues scale. Now, regular major scale, I'm going to tell you this as best I can, not noting that I'm not a classical pianist, but a major scale in C would be. In the blues scale, you're flatting the 3rd, so this is your major 3rd. Now you flat it. You're also flatting the 7th. These are the most important ones. So, and you can also flat, those are the most important, but you can also flat the 5th. So, and the mixture of those flats in the scale gives you that blues scale. So it's important to know all that. And when you're improvising, you can play between the flat and the major, and you're coming up with a bluesier sound. So if you were to just play, you know, that's a very major sound, but if you were to play, that's a bluesy sound. Or, so you can go back and forth between the flatted 3rd, the flatted 5th, and the flatted 7th to the major 3rd, the major 5th, and the major 7th. Or, and you can slide. You can use your right hand. You don't have to strictly hit one note at a time. You can slide it down. You can go. That would probably be a good exercise to do, is do a little bit of that. And then doing it on the 4 chord. And then again on the 1. And on the 5. 4. You could do a lot of variations on that, and once you learn a lot of different variations, you have things you can play with in your right hand. Let's play around with the 7th a little bit. So. You can play with both of them. So that'll give you a little idea, maybe some inspiration of what to do with your right hand. And you also, it's important to know your chords in all their positions. So if you have your C major chord, you could also invert it. Or you can start on the 3, on the 5, on the 1. Do that with all your C majors, or all your major chords, and then do it with the 7ths. And of course, do it with each chord in the progression. So for the 4 chord. And of course, the 5 chord being the G. And there you have some of your basic chords in the blues scale. Now, of course, I'm showing you all this in C. The most important thing, another important thing to do, would be to develop it in all your keys as much as possible. Now, if you go back, of course, many of the great boogie-woogie players, I don't know that they all played in every key, but the more keys you can play in, the better player you're going to be. So that's my recommendation, is to work in the scales and chords of every key in both hands. So start off simply, though. Start off in one key and learn all your basics, and then try another key. Let's say start in C, then try it in G, then F, and then B flat, and then go on from there into E flat and get more difficult as you go along. Don't try to take too much at once. It's taken me many, many years to get to this position. Many years of playing and performing. I would also like to throw in at this point that if my philosophy has always been, as a musician, if you want to be a musician, you should earn your living as a musician. If you, as much as you can, whatever it is, if you play parties, weddings, bar mitzvahs, I don't care what it is. If you make your money as a musician, that means those 4 hours that you're playing that gig is you're practicing, and you're going to be getting better, and you're going to be learning, and you're going to be playing with other musicians. So that's just my little philosophy on becoming a successful boogie-woogie piano player. And as a piano player, one great thing is you can be a solo act. You don't need a whole band, especially a boogie-woogie piano player. That was the whole deal when it first developed as an art. There were rent parties in Harlem and most of the African-American communities, and you'd have a boogie-woogie piano player who would play a whole night. He'd have a great repertoire, and he'd keep everybody dancing. And this was a way that people would earn money to pay their rent in some of the African-American communities. So it's you have great possibilities as a pianist. You can always fall back on yourself, and you can entertain a whole room because you're covering bass, you're covering rhythm, and you're covering melody. And then if you can sing on top of that, you've got everything going on at the same time. And there's very few other instruments that can provide that for you as a musician. And that's one of the reasons, I love the piano. And it's just a great instrument, and boogie-woogie is a great expression on the piano. And we can go back into a little more history of it. It was a style that was developed by the African-American bluesmen who played piano back in the late 1800s into the 1900s. There was a lot of styles that changed. I'm sure you're all familiar with ragtime, and from ragtime developed stride piano, and then boogie-woogie piano. So also another good style to learn is a little bit of stride, which we can get into on further videos in this series. Some of the great artists that I have listened to, had great opportunities to hear over the years. I got to hear Roosevelt Sykes before he passed away, Toots Washington. Champion Jack Dupree is another great who just recently passed away. And one thing about Champion Jack Dupree, I would recommend listening to Blues from the Gutter, which is one of his classic albums. And Jack Dupree was not a highly educated pianist. He was definitely not classically trained. And that's what I love about him. I mean, he's just taking risks. He's just playing from his heart and from his soul. And it's not going to be totally correct according to the proper way to play the piano, but it's going to be slamming. And I would recommend listening to some of his stuff. And I'll play a little bit, just some stuff from that he, you know, in his style that always cracks me up, because if he forgot the note, he would just punch the keyboard here. So I don't know if this is correct, but we'll do it anyways here. There you have a little bit of Champion Jack Dupree, who was a great, great pianist. I'd like to throw in here also a really great thing to do when you're playing in your right hand. They might call it tickling the ivories, tickling the keys, and I like to do a lot of that, and it's fun. You're doing a roll. You can do a lot of rolling using those flatted fifths and flatted thirds in your right hand. Slowing it down and speeding it up. That's sort of a roll. And then a more tickle even is if you're using the flatted seventh, I'll slow it down a little bit. And then you can use try that in all the keys, you know. Now let's play a whole thing. Roll. Tickle. Roll. Tickle. Using your chords. Mix them all up. Then you have a few things you can do there with your right hand and your left hand together. Okay, well, you're probably wondering where Boogie Woogie is going to take me. I'm a piano player here. I learned this Boogie Woogie. Maybe it's in style. Maybe it'll be in style for a little while. Maybe it won't. But you know, Boogie Woogie was the roots of rock and roll. And all the great rock and roll piano players, Jerry Lee Lewis, Fats Domino, Little Richard, were really Boogie Woogie players. And then the music changed and they speeded it up, and you have rock and roll. And we could slow it down a little bit, but basically you've learned it, and it's just you'd be playing more of a rock and roll beat instead of a 8 to the bar beat. So. And if you were Jerry Lee, a little richer, you might get a little more flamboyant, you might say. Or like myself, Mitch Woods, you might get just as flamboyant and be doing something like this. That's a little technique you might want to do. Just rolling your fingers up the keys. I don't want to show you all my tricks, but I'll show you a few here right now. Bringing your thumb back down there. And if you really want to go crazy and you're tired of playing with your hands, there's always your feet. Now, before I start with the feet, I would like to point out the proper dress for a piano player. Notice the shoes, very important. The fine suit, the cool tie. You got to have a little bit of style, and then you're jumping, you're jiving, you're boogie woogieing, you're rock and rolling, whatever the heck you want to do, you're doing it here. You can expand on it even more by jumping on a piano, which I'm not going to do in this series. That'll be on the Mitch Woods Acrobatic Piano Series coming up soon. So that you can have fun. The whole idea of playing piano is to have fun. And the more fun you're having, the more fun people are having. And the more money they're going to pay you to have fun. So keep that in mind. Just have a good time and be creative with it. And enjoy yourselves and play boogie woogie. Right on. Now with boogie woogie is generally an up-tempo style of music. It gets people dancing, it gets people lively. But there's a lot of variations on it. You can take your time with it. You can do slower boogie woogie, which is more bluesy. And you could do a medium tempo, which would be a walking type boogie woogie. Or you could really go fast with it and really go crazy. One thing I've learned, and I can't stress it enough, that I've been very fortunate in my life to have been around and learned from some of the greats. I've done duets with Johnny Johnson, who has played with Chuck Berry, was Chuck Berry's original piano player. I've worked with John Lee Hooker. Some of the great old-timers. I've ran across Charles Brown. We've talked extensively. And what I find, especially with them, is that they don't rush things. Now, you can play fast, but you don't have to rush things. They believe in taking their time. And Johnny said to me, Johnny Johnson actually said, they call that loafing, you know, so you want to be, that's a style of playing, is loafing. And if you want to be just taking it easy, you don't have to play every note that you know, that doesn't show that you're a great player. You want to be sparing with your notes, be economical, but play the right ones. And you can loaf a little bit. You can do a more medium tempo type boogie woogie also, which is just walking. A little bit faster you can do it also, really go crazy, I have another little bass line that can really get you going, and it goes, I'll do it slowly. This is a very fast one though. And I would recommend Albert Ammons for listening to some of this stuff. That's probably one of my influences on that. And we're going to give it a whirl here right now. So now, I'm sure you've been inspired by the Boogie Woogie piano, and I hope you're going to take this inspiration and play for your friends and your family, and eventually on stage if you're not already there, and with other musicians. And I want to thank you for joining me here on this video. I want to let you also know there's a booklet that accompanies this video, and it explains and gives you the notation and fingering for a lot of the techniques that I described here. So I'd like you to refer to that booklet with this. And once again, I'd like to stress that it's most important to listen to some of the great piano masters over the years who've created this great American art form of boogie woogie. And included in that, as I've mentioned before, is Meade Lux Lewis, Albert Ammons, Pete Johnson, Jimmy Yancey, Freddie Slack, Professor Longhair, and Champion Jack Dupree, and of course myself, Mitch Woods, at the 88s. And if you like what you hear in this video, I would encourage you to pick up my CDs. I have 5 of them out, 4 of them on the Blind Pig record label, and 1 on the Viceroy Lightyear label. The first one is Steady Date with Mitch Woods and his Rocket 88s. The second one is Mr. Boogie's Back in Town. Then Solid Gold Cadillac, which features Charlie Musselwhite on harmonica, The Roomful of Blues horns, and Ronnie Earl on guitar. Shakin' the Shack. And my most recent album is on the Viceroy Lightyear label. It's called Keeper of the Flame. It was a great project that I had the pleasure of recording duets, just myself on piano with some of the great blues masters, including John Lee Hooker, James Cotton on harmonica, Johnny Johnson on piano. We did 4-handed boogie woogie. We got 2 pianos in the studio, and it was a great kick. Definitely want to hear that. Lee Allen, one of the great saxophone players from Fats Domino's band, and Earl King from New Orleans. It's called Keeper of the Flame, and it's a great one if you really want to tune into the piano, so I recommend that. So come and hear my band, Mitch Woods and his Rocket 88s. We play all around the world. I'd love to see you at one of my gigs, and thanks for tuning into this video.